This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC and JZ Microphones. So get ready to rock.
If you take your mix that sounds perfect in your studio and you put it in your car, does your car, when you pop in your favorite CD from so-and-so, does it sound muffled in your car and sound crystal clear on your studio setup? You want your mix to sound in your car the same way that other releases do.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. This episode is sponsored by OWC, Otherworld Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, your trusted source for memory and speed upgrades, DIY installs, and used Macs for your studio. Let OWC focus on keeping your studio Mac in killer condition so that you can focus on making great music. Why ditch your existing Mac when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and learn how you can supercharge your studio Mac. The speed to create, the capacity to dream. Now find out how awesome your studio can be at OWC. This episode is sponsored by JZ Microphones with a unique golden drop capsule design. The Vintage Series V67 and V11 microphones offer Class A discrete amplifier circuitry, extremely low self-noise, and advanced built-in shock mount technology to bring a rich, warm sound to your studio with crisp clarity and detail that will make you wish that you had discovered these mics a whole lot sooner. Go to jzmic.com or click the link in the show notes below and use the limited time coupon Rockstar right now to get 50% off their Vintage Series microphones. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw. Welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Tim Dolbear, who cut his musical teeth playing live with people such as Sammy Hagar and in the studio with his mentor producer Keith Olsen. Currently, he works with both labels and independent artists and received projects from all over the world. Since 1999, he's owned and operated Eclectica Studios, originally located in Los Angeles, and later moved to Austin, Texas in 2006. And then recently, in 2019, Eclectica Studios has moved its location to Nashville, Tennessee. So he's now living here with me. I mean, not literally, but nearby. Tim is a guest lecturer for audio production at many colleges throughout America, including Blackbird Academy, New York University, and SAE. He's also a published writer who writes for Mix, Sound on Sound, and Professional Sound magazine. I met Tim recently through Mark Rubel at Blackbird Academy, so thank you again, Mr. Mark Rubel. He's responsible for many wonderful guests on the show. Please welcome Tim Dolbear to Recording Studio Rockstars. Tim, are you ready to rock?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me here.
Dude, it's a pleasure. And then we also have a silent partner here. Tim's wife, Angela, is here with us, listening and again, giving off good vibes. So
absolutely.
Welcome to the studio, guys. Great to have you here on the show. And, I've read your bio, but give us a little bit of a brief introduction to who you are and how you got started out in music.
So I started playing music when I was a little kid. When I was 5, I got my first guitar, wanted to be John Denver, and was off and running with that. Then I heard the Beatles. Then I heard Eddie Van Halen. And just like any guitar player that's in their late 40s or early 50s probably has the same type of background as that. We all wanted to be Eddie Van Halen or Randy Rhoads, and the battle between those two continues. And I started playing the clubs in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, and all over the LA basin when I was 15. Playing in bands where I would have to wait outside the bar, and then they would bring me in right before we got to go on, and then I would have to leave immediately after we exited the stage, and really cut my teeth doing that, and fell in love with just guitar and the whole rock scene and everything, and went to Musicians Institute, specifically GIT, when I was 17 after graduating early from high school, and graduated from GIT at age 18, which would have been 1988.
I'm not jealous already.
And well, there's good and bad. I mean, every path has its good and bad. So
I know, and I don't mean to interrupt. Yeah. I've just always been so fascinated when I hear stories about people who like started young, playing clubs before you're of age, stuff like that. For me, I was such a late bloomer, and then getting to study guitar like that, it sounds pretty cool.
It was really cool. It was cool and confusing because you have a dream, I think, when you're young of where you want to go, and college is a really good way to have your dreams smashed and torn to pieces and kind of throw you off in a different direction and spin you. So I dealt with that a little bit coming out of college. You have the one or two people, in your life that tell you that you're probably a better behind the scenes person than in front of the scene person. So I dealt with that a lot when I was young, but I ended up playing all over. Like you mentioned, I got to back up Sammy Hagar for some solo shows he did in 91, I believe it was, when I was a little 21-year-old. And
so that's post Sammy and Van Halen.
No,
right?
just pre-post.
Pre-post.
It was the spring when they released the Found Under Carnal Knowledge, their last album together.
Okay.
With that lineup. While that album was coming out and being finalized and mastered or whatever like that, I was out with him.
And before that was I Can't Drive 55 was the 80s. That was Sammy, right?
That was in 1985. So this is 85. Back in 91.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
So, and it was really cool. I mean, obviously there's as a total side note, there's something really interesting about going from playing the clubs in a local band where you have a singer where you're like, I'm not sure if he's even going to show up, let alone be able to do good. Oh, I hope he's not doing anything tonight, like drugs or alcohol that are going to screw him up or anything. And then you go and you play on stage and there's someone like Sammy Hagar is your front man all of a sudden. And the empowering that it gives you and the confidence that it gives you is so over the top. There's to go from one extreme to the other extreme is just unbelievable. And of course, obviously the crowd difference when you have a sold out place, and they're pushing up against the stage and girls are yelling stuff to you that I won't even say on your show. But it's just,
it's okay. You're allowed to, but you don't have to.
Okay. I won't. But you realize it's like I could have played guitar with my elbow and it would have just ripped because there's so much like adrenaline and stuff going on. It was just a completely new world. And so after I did the shows with him, he went on tour with Van Halen for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. At the end of their tour, I went and saw Van Halen at their closing show at Irvine Meadows. And all of a sudden I'm in the audience again watching him. And that's a kick in the gut to go from being up there to now you're back in the audience watching it again. And I don't know, it was kind of messed with me a little bit, but I continued to perform. I did a lot of singer-songwriter stuff also after that, where I toured all over the Western United States, basically just doing singer-songwriter type stuff. Sammy was the guy who got me to sing because every singer I'd ever dealt with was an issue, had drug problems or this or that. And even though I wasn't a natural singer by any means, I talked to him about it, and he really gave me a phrase that kind of pushes me along still to this day, which is just shut up and do it.
Right.
And it's like, and I said, yeah, but I play guitar and I'm a lead guitar player. And he's like, yeah, just shut up and do it.
Does he have a song called Just Shut Up and Do It? Because that sounds like another hit from the 80s.
He should, Exactly. So anyway, so that's performing. And so I continued to perform and play with people and do my own thing and stuff until about 99. When I met Keith Olsen at the Durango Songwriters Expo in Durango, Colorado, which is a private invite singer-songwriter artist. They invite like 70 or 75 of them, and then 70 or 75 industry people. And that was a real eye-opener. I went to that for like 3 years in a row. And I met Keith the second year I was there, I think, or first or second, and then again on the final year. And at the final year, he heard my album that I brought, and he said, you should be producing, and brought me into his studio in Los Angeles out in the valley called Goodnight LA Studios, which is If you watch the documentary on Sound City, the main studio, Keith worked out of there, and he did like the Fleetwood Mac first album. He did Heart, Pat Benatar, Grateful Dead, like 90% of my record collection he had produced, or at least his name was stamped on there as producing. I don't know how involved he gets into each thing as he got super busy, but in the early days, obviously. Well, he opened up the place next door, which was Goodnight LA Studios. And that's the place, if you watch that documentary on Sound City, Keith Olsen's easy to recognize. He's the one wearing like a $4,000 suit when everyone else they interview looks like they're homeless now, which is kind of I don't know if they are, but when you see it, it's like, oh man, you look like you're on hard times. When Keith looks like he has a ton of money still, and it's one of those things that kind of lends itself to the next thing I say, which is a lot of people have asked me what I learned from Keith Olsen, and I remember one of the first couple times that I went out there, the first thing he sat me down and wanted to teach me was money.
Right. I think that's always such a great lesson to business.
Learn. So I never learned how to mic a damn thing from Keith Olsen at any of those times where I went and interned or assist or anything like that. I didn't learn anything like that. He taught me business side of it, and that part's awesome. Awesome.
So the studio was Goodnight LA, right next to Sound City.
Yeah.
And that's where you were working with Keith. Not interning at this point, but actually working for him, assisting.
It was kind of weird. I went out and just hung with him like 3 or 4 times, and then basically intern type stuff.
Right.
And then he ended up after doing that for a while, he went and moved to Seattle to work for Mackie, designing a large format touchscreen console that was never released. I have a picture, though, of him and a couple other guys sitting in front of the mock-up of it.
Wow.
And so that was in 1999, and he left me there at Goodnight LA with an engineer named Peter Love, who hired me as second, and I was there very briefly when I realized that it wasn't the right situation for me, and I would just open up my own place.
Let me back up for just one sec, though, just to make sure we're reiterating a point, which I think is valuable for the rock stars listening. If I'm hearing you correctly, here you are having gone through a situation where you had already been on stage and played in a band with Sammy Hagar, and then were still willing to say, I'll do a little bit of an internship at a place because I'm, curious about starting something new.
Right. Because it was under him. It was so worth it to like get some experience under him. But, in preparing for this interview, you had a really interesting question in there, which you'll probably end up asking, but might be right time now to
jump the gun. Ask it now. Ask it for me.
What was like a hard lesson type of thing, or what did you do early on that really screwed?
Right. What was a mistake that turned into a learning experience for you?
Yeah, and it was the early days. I had way too much ego, overconfidence about recording. I've been in studios. I've recorded a lot as a musician, but for some reason I thought, okay, hey, Keith is no longer good at LA Studios. I shall spring out on my own, and I will open up my own studio in my house, and then and I'll off and running, and I had clients coming in and this and that. And I think I had way too much confidence in doing that. Looking back on it, I should have completely done everything I could to intern at studios and cut my teeth that way, and got to work with some bigger name people that would have helped on my line card later on. I know a lot of people who were interns who got coffee and sandwiches and snacks and stuff for big famous pop stars and rock stars that are out there that then went on their own, and they're like, yeah, I worked with so-and-so. And I'm like, well, you didn't exactly work with them, but I guess technically you're a part of the team that worked with them. So I guess maybe you did, however you want to judge it. But still, it's like it really helped them launch their career.
Yeah.
Plus, they got a lot of great contacts. I immediately strived out on my own, and it was like, fine, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this my way. I'm going to open up a place in Siberia, and people will just come to me. No, it's like,
build it and they will come.
Oh, yeah.
Field of Dreams, right? You were still cursed by that movie.
And the thing is people did come. So that built my confidence even more, and I did everything possible wrong.
So you mentioned something a moment ago. You said, for my line card, is that what you said?
Line card?
Yeah.
Line card.
Yeah, what is that? Is that an
meaning-
expression from LA or something?
Yeah, kind of like your credits.
Okay.
Yeah, your line card. Actually, I think line card would have come from my own dictionary in my head, because that's actually if you're a sales rep, and I was a sales rep in the mid '90s. My day gig was I was a sales rep for Washburn Guitars, as well as Seymour Duncan Audix microphones and a bunch of other, and that was my line card. Those were all the different things. But now I think about credits as, hey, if I'm going to give you my bio, it's at the bottom of it's my line card. These are the things I've done. So that's nice. That's kind of it.
Okay, so this going out, build it and they will come attitude. How did you come about? Like, how did that turn into a good learning experience for you? What did you take away from that? And what was the fail there? It didn't work so well?
It took me 15 years to get where I should have been. If I had continued working with other people, I would have been there probably in 2 or 3. I had a lot of hard knocks because of that. And I'm sure you would have in other routes too, but there was a lot of struggles. There was a lot of everything's trial and error. Like the studio I just finished building here in Nashville, I designed totally myself. And it's like, well, what gives you the right? Well, I've now built 5 studios.
Right.
And my first one wasn't so good. My second one wasn't so good. Third one wasn't so good, but better. My fourth one, the one we had in Austin, was fantastic, but there was a couple things I would have tweaked on that too. And so it's all learning. And I'm very much a problem-solving, troubleshooting type person, and I love to learn it. Yeah, I learn everything you can. Like I always say, if you're an audio engineer or a musician, learn every instrument. Get a trumpet and learn how to make 3 or 4 notes on it. Because if you can just make 3 or 4 squeaky notes on a trumpet, you'll know everything about a trumpet as far as recording. All of a sudden you realize, oh, whoa, the sound comes out here. As opposed to a saxophone, it doesn't come out that horn bell thing. It comes out all the keys. Oh, but what are you going to do with a tenor where the keys are spread out real far? And if you put the mic on this part of the keys, it sounds funky down here where the sound's coming out for different notes. You start learning that stuff, and you'll learn it if you know how to play a bunch of instruments. It just opens you up to that world.
That's so true. I mean, I think about getting with an acoustic guitar on a microphone, and when you're playing the guitar, you just immediately start scooting around, angling it to the mic, listening to how does it sound? How does it sound? Yeah. Oh, that's kind of cool right there. Yeah. And you just instinctively do that. And I was talking about this recently on the podcast. For me, playing electric guitar in the control room, sometimes I scratch my head and I wonder, it's like, are the people that I'm recording, are they remembering to do that if I'm recording them? It's like, come on, guys, you gotta, you're the one who knows whether your instrument sounds great, and you gotta push for it.
Yep. Well, if I could go back to your other question, if I could go back in time and start over, I would have interned at places. I saw an interview with a couple studio managers. And they said a really interesting thing that I've kind of built my career on. We're in the hospitality industry.
Yeah, I like that.
And it's like I should have at some point early on in the recording business part of my life, I should have worked as a waiter or a waitress somewhere. I should have gotten a job at like the Courtyard Marriott working the front desk.
I was a terrible waiter.
Yeah.
I was the worst.
But you learn so much, because it's like when people come in the door, the difference between my studio and your studio, the only difference that matters is me and you. I've gotten to the point where Eclectica Studios, our name is slowly disappearing as our brand, and the brand is simply becoming Tim Dolbear. Not that I want to be a third person, but it's the only thing different. You can never have as much studio as the next guy. I mean, especially when Blackbird's in the same town as you. My gosh. But
on the same planet.
But seriously, it's like, just because you have a nice kitchen doesn't mean you know how to cook. And it's all about the chef, and it's all about their attitude, the hospitality, and what they're serving up and how they're taking care of people. And so I would have spent way more time learning that early on.
Well, it reminds me, to rewind a bit to what you just said about learning all the instruments. I was a terrible waiter. I was the worst. And the worst thing that could happen is for you to come into the restaurant I was working at and happen to have been one of my friends, because then I would have been like instinctively like, oh, they're good. And I never would have come to your table, which I did to my friends. But it was like, but then after, 20 years of actually eating out at restaurants and experiencing it, I was like, I think I might have a better idea of what it's like to go wait on a table now, just knowing what somebody needs.
Yeah.
And it's like what you said about playing all the instruments.
Yeah.
I find that's true with drums too. Sometimes it's pretty remarkable. You can go put up a good mic and get a level, and then you go hit the drums and you hear like, oh, if I kind of hit it with some character and not too loud, it sounds a whole lot better than if I just smack them and the hi-hat's crashing loud.
Someone playing a drum kit. It's a kit. It's one instrument. It is a single kit. And oh my gosh, the differences are just amazing. I have a story later on for one of your other questions that goes along with that. But it's that same type of thing. It's the musician. It's all about the musician. You hand a Sears Harmony POS guitar to Eddie Van Halen, and it sounds like Eddie Van Halen playing it.
Yeah. I mean, it is a Sears Harmony. That's a pretty cool guitar, too.
Okay, let's pick a bad one. A Cort guitar
there
from 1981.
No, a First Act.
A First Act.
From Walmart. Sorry, First Act owners. All right, let me ask you this. I like to have guests on the show share an inspirational quote, kick us off, and get us excited about hitting the studio. You got anything you want to share?
My go-to that I really have always tried to make it, and it's on the wall at Blackbird, which if you don't know about Blackbird, it is the best school in the world for audio engineering. Oh my gosh. Up on the wall, I have it, my quote, it's all about the song.
Yeah.
It's all about the song because man, I can have a client come in and we can record up a song and it can sound absolutely beautiful, wonderfully, technically awesome, best sounding acoustic guitar. If it doesn't capture anybody because it's not a great song, it's not going to capture anybody. Just like you can have an absolutely fantastic song and record it on a Radio Shack cassette player, and it's a great song. So it's all about the song.
So a couple of thoughts. One is, first question is, if it's a great song, can we still screw it up?
You can screw it up in the performance. I don't think you can screw it up in the recording. Because I mean, what's your favorite song of all time? I got one. I'll just pick mine.
Yeah, pick one.
Okay.
I don't have one ready.
So like Tempted by Squeeze. It's one of my favorite songs of all time.
That's
okay.
A great one.
Now, if the kick drum had a little bit too much boom and not any click on it whatsoever, or if it had too much click to it, would it have wrecked the song? Would anyone listen to it and go, man, I love this song. It gets me, it pulls my heartstrings. It's so wonderful. Oh, but that fucking kick. I'm never listening to this again.
What about this? What about the singer though? The voice.
Like I said, the performance can destroy a song.
Yeah.
The performance can, but nothing we do as audio engineers, I think, can necessarily destroy a song. I think what we can do is show it in a bad light. But I think, when I watch my friends doing stuff, like working, we had a roommate for a while where he listened to everything on his phone. He would just play music on his phone. No speaker, no nothing. It's just, I call it the Lady Gaga style because on her documentary, she plays a song that she just finished recording for her mom in this $1 million studio probably and this everything. And she plays it for her mom and it's just a real sensitive moment. She's playing it on her phone through the little tiny nothing speaker.
Not even in speakerphone mode.
Nothing. Just and so that's a good example right there. It's really about the song. Do you think her mom listened to it and went, I know my heartstrings are pulled, but I'm just going to close it down because it's not an
iPhone
there.
X.
Right. It's not, the fidelity's not there.
So just to name drop for a moment, just because you threw in Squeeze.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of how to say this, but I did have the pleasure of recording Glenn Tilbrook here once. And well, it wasn't that mic and it wasn't that pop screen, it wasn't that cable, but it might possibly have been that mic stand right there.
Wow, that's cool. That's rad.
All right, good. All right, enough name dropping.
That's so cool.
Awesome.
And if you don't know that song, Tempted by Squeeze, please Google it, listen to it. It's just, everything about it to me is absolutely a perfect record. Supertramp has a couple absolute perfect records too, like Long Way Home.
And then, Squeeze, it took me a long time to figure out, but part of the cool sound was that they would do the octave vocal thing, right?
Yeah.
All the time, the two voices, and that was just such a great effect.
Yeah, it's God, I was just talking to somebody the other day about that. It's like Fleetwood Mac. You would never, ever, ever think that those three voices would go together well. Lindsey Buckingham has such a specific sound to his voice. And it's not a great voice. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. It's not like a classically great, beautiful voice. Super unique. Same with Stevie Nicks. Oh my gosh. But when you hear Stevie Nicks, when I hear Stevie Nicks start singing like Rihanna, I get chills every time. I've heard that song a billion times. I always get chills. It kills me. It kills me. It brings tears to my eyes immediately. And then McVeigh, she has more of a beautiful classic voice type thing. And you put those three together though, and you would never expect it sounds good. You listen to anything from the first 4 or 5 Fleetwood Mac albums, and it's just, the harmonies are stunning.
Yeah.
It's the same thing you're saying about Squeeze. It's like they found a thing that made those voices work together, and it's just gold.
That's the cool thing about it. I mean, it's like you don't have to have a trained voice, but what you do have to have is, I think you have to have people that have really invested the time and the energy into sort of like mining from their own souls what their vocal sound is, and delivering their own voice in a spot on way, whatever that is.
Absolutely. I always say, another inspirational quote, a great voice doesn't sell records. A unique voice, an interesting voice sells records. People always like, why is Tom Petty or Bob Dylan, well, because their voice is interesting. They don't have this incredible, great, voice. They have an interesting voice. And that doesn't mean someone with a great voice won't sell records like a Tony Harnell or a Celine Dion, because they do have their interesting things in their voice that draws you in. But then you listen to, one of my other favorite singers that, as far as like a fantastic, incredible voice, is Linda Eder, who does a lot of Broadway. And she just has an absolutely fantastic, brilliant voice. But she doesn't have necessarily something super unique and interesting that stands out. I think that's why it works so great for Broadway, is because she's able to sit into the different things so well.
Right.
But as far as pop rock record type things, there's not that thing to grab onto.
Well, and when you have an interesting voice, if you're not doing Broadway, you're doing your own record. You only got to sit into your own personality.
Absolutely.
Just right. This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can go to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level. And you can start right now with my free introduction to mixing course, Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you are in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Well, so let's talk a little bit about Eclectica Studios and building the new one. You talked about the things you've learned. Mm-hmm. Break down some of the things that went through your mind as you build studio number 5.
Sure. I wanted taller ceilings. I make all of my own cables. I test stuff ridiculously. I think that's why I've gotten to write so many reviews for Mix Magazine, is because I know how to ABC things.
Right.
Which is, you always record the results and listen to them the next day. You never A/B something and record the 2 results and listen to them play back right away. Come back fresh ears and listen to them anonymously where you don't know what's what. But there's stuff like in your overheads, listen to a drummer playing in your live room, whoever's listening, live room, not specifically here or mine or anything, but whatever space you're recording, listen to the hi-hats and listen to really tight staccato. Are you hearing it flam off the wall?
Right.
And how is that affecting it and this and that? Because you're going to get a little slapback no matter where things are, unless you're outside and in a football field with no stadium around it.
Yeah.
There's gonna be
and some instruments that slapback might not bother you, and so you might not notice it, but you make a good point. If you clapped your hands between 2 walls, hopefully the sound of a flutter echo, and you hear that Rockstars, and it goes and you're like, oh, listen to that. That can't be right.
Exactly.
But you might forget that, oh, by the way, that hi-hat that's closed, it's just like clapping your hands, and it's just as important.
Yeah, and if anything, it's actually a tighter closer sound than a clap. I mean, it would be a really tight hand clap to make it do it. And obviously, the tighter you get, the more of a flam you'll get off of a wall. And hi-hat, that always drove me nuts. I don't think anyone ever heard it. They certainly didn't hear it when things were done. There was workflow. I'm really, really crazy about workflow. And for instance, I want a singer to walk out of my control room and walk into the tracking room up to the microphone and sing. I certainly don't want a cable running across where they have to walk in. And where we put in the Austin studio, we put the wall connectors for the XLRs were on one side of the room, and no matter what we did, no matter how I did it, you had to run a cable across the entrance into the live room, and I wanted it to be clean.
You mean like when I had my friends here for a weekend, and twice in one weekend, they tripped over the headphone cable in the kitchen area going for the beer. Bingo. And ripped the entire headphone box down onto the ground, smashing. Oh, yeah, that stuff happens.
And then I got, I'm not one of those, I guess I'm getting that way. I guess I am one of those guys who hears the difference in every cable and stuff. I'm getting to that point where I'm a little over the top about things. There's a cable that's out of Austin. A guy makes them, and they're called Colossal cables. And they're so over the top good microphone cables. And I'm one of those snake oil people. I have to prove to myself and A/B it, do the review type thing. And he gave me an XLR cable that I took from a microphone, plugged it into my wall jack, and then of course from there into my system, it's going through my normal, Mogami cables, install that I did. And the difference between that Colossal cable and a Monster cable and a Belden cable was just disturbing. Just disturbing. Not like, can you hear that? I think I hear a little bit. No, it was disturbing. And so I bought a bunch of his cables and I used them for recording and obviously. But his cables have a jacket on them that's this nylon covering that's really tough and really nice. But if I have cement floors in my studio because I love the sound of cement. We can get into that. That's a whole nother subject. But I love the way cement sounds. But if you step on one of these cables, it's like stepping on a wet bar of soap. You are gone. You will fly across the room. Oh. And so to have that across the walkway, is probably a little bit of an insurance issue because someone's going to slip and fall. And so I was getting to the point where I was having a telephone wire, microphone cables over the top, and stuff. Just anything I could do to get them out of the way. So this time, all of the connectors are on the opposite side of the room. And I mean, all of that's been thought out for workflow. Everything workflow.
So let me rewind you for a moment. And let me also just drop in a little comment to my friends, Chris and Matt. I still love you guys, even though my headphone box went down, just in case you're listening. Let me back you up to the snare drum comment. So you made the hi-hat comment. You made a great comment about the hi-hat, but you didn't kind of give us, what's our takeaway? What's a fix for hearing that slap off the wall and that echo and stuff?
Well, obviously address the wall so that there's no reflection.
There's no obviously here.
Oh, okay. Sorry. What I did was I put something to stop the reflection. And
what are some useful things that stop a reflection like that?
Oh, various different things. You can get from the very basic. You can get studio foam that looks like egg crates, which will do diffusion, which sends sound off in every different direction. So when sound waves hit that, they don't just reflect straight back up to where your microphone is. They reflect in every different direction, diffusing them. Other things you can get GIK acoustics. If I can do a prop or a shout out to them.
Sure.
I love GIK acoustics.
Anything you love in the studio, you're welcome to give a shout out to.
Good. They do all of my sound panel stuff and they're just great. And for instance, most of the sound panels I put on my walls are, the inside of it is a sound baffle material, and the name of it totally escapes me. Something wool, sound wool.
Rock wool?
Rock wool. There we go. Rock wool. Ding, ding, ding. And rock wool, plus they have it suspended out, and so there's like a bladder behind it. So all of that helps absorb sound energy and turn that energy into heat and disperse it. as well as, since it's being absorbed, it's not being reflected off. And if you need extra help with reflection to have it dispersed off and do even more diffusion as well as absorption, you can put a plate that they have, a wood plate goes in it or on it, whichever way you order it, which will actually diffuse the sound and scatter the sound all over the place, so you don't get that straight mirror reflection of a sound going back up to it. Now, in my case, in Austin, our live room had just over a 7-foot ceiling, which is way too low to record. So you have issues with vocals bouncing off the ceiling, you have drums bouncing off the ceiling, everything. So I was constantly doing stuff to try to counteract that. So the new studio is all 10-foot ceilings, which gives you a lot more space to work with, a lot more room for sound to develop also before it's smacking into something and having to change its energy and direction.
Where are some places where it's okay to just have a regular old flat wall in a room like the one you're talking about? Are you intentionally having some sort of absorber, diffuser anywhere on the wall that's like the first reflection for a drum kit or an instrument or whatever?
Yes.
And then then other walls that are sort of like out there in the room, those are okay to just leave open?
I mean, now when I get into this new studio, I have to experiment around with where the sweet spots are for like putting a drum kit and things like that. But I have a basic idea of where they are. I know like where the vocal one is because I designed the entire room angles specifically for that. So it's as long as all of that works, and I might be off by a foot or two, but hopefully I'm not off by 12 feet. Then I have to reverse everything around. So I'm starting with where it's at right now, and I'll start doing experimenting over the next couple weeks as we get going. If it's first reflections to where the microphone is, those I'm usually trying to take down, unless they're farther away than 15, 20 feet of sound travel. Then I'm not worried too much about reflections.
Right. Then it's not going to get there any faster. It's not going to get there near at the same time as it's going to hit the mic directly or whatever.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. I mean, if someone's standing 2 feet from a wall and singing, and they're facing away from the wall, so they're not facing at the wall, but they're 2 feet away from the wall, their backs to the wall, and they say something, sound's coming out the back of their body and is traveling the 2 feet behind them, hitting the wall, traveling the 2 feet back towards them, another 6 inches past them and into the microphone, which is 4.5 feet of travel. So you're looking at about 5 milliseconds, 4.5 to 5 milliseconds of delay time between the sound leaving their lips and touching and hitting the microphone and leaving their lips, hitting the wall, bouncing back. And that's a comb filter. So you got a 5 millisecond comb filter happening there.
Is that related to the expression that dude's talking out of his ass?
Yeah, really, if it's coming out. Hey, my side note, my vocal teacher, Tim Hall, once told me, if you can get sound resonating out of your ass, great, because you want every cavity and orifice in your body just sound.
Yeah,
you want
radiating
sound coming everywhere, exactly.
Interesting.
Which is a miking nightmare. You definitely need a windscreen.
Right. Now all of a sudden you're like the whatever it was, the soprano saxophone that was too long, and you got to mic it all up and down the sound holes now.
Yeah, a tenor or a bari.
Yeah. All right. So workflow. You don't want cables going across.
Yeah.
So you start thinking about things like, as soon as somebody sets something down, they need to plug in. They need a wall outlet very close by. Right. You start thinking about. They're going to need headphones. I don't want to have cables running all over the damn place to hook up headphones for people, and then mic lines. So what are some smart things about that? Are there any like kind of universal takeaways, or is every studio just like, hey, don't put the panel there, put it over on the right instead?
Depends on the size of the room. That would be the main thing. Now, this will seem like a little bit of a travel, but going back to when I started, if I had it to do it over again, I would work out of bigger studios, real studios, you could say, not like my own personal studio, but like a commercial studio. One, half of my life is maintenance. I'm sure you can relate to that. So if you don't want to have to do studio maintenance, don't own a studio, because half your life is maintenance.
Let somebody else do the maintenance. And cross your fingers that they're doing it.
Yeah. And don't hold your soldering gun like it's a pencil, because it'll burn your fingers. The thing that I would have done is that, so I could just work on it and just be able to do the audio engineering side and not have to maintain a studio or deal with any of that other stuff. So that's one side of it. if you do have your own thing, every studio's different, every room's different. And so thinking about the workflow, if you haven't experienced a ton of studio in your life and recording sessions in your life, then obviously figuring out the workflow is not going to work. But if you've been doing it for 20 years, you can sit there in a room and think about where everything should be to make the workflow easier and better. And so, for instance, this time, my room's 15 by 15, basically. Every wall's on a 17 to a 20% angle off of it. And so for sound reflections. So I have no flutter echo anywhere whatsoever. I just
Wait, did you say 15 by 15?
Basically 15 by 15. It's just an overdub
Is that sort of a square or a cube, though? Or
that's what I mean. Basically, it's like that.
Okay.
So like one wall is... the best way is how would you, what's the size of a room if a room is basically a circle? Because it's very much kind of circle-ish looking with all of the angles and stuff.
Right, I see.
So it's like basically, for sake of argument, it's 15 by 15-ish and 10-foot ceilings. So I don't have multiple people in there tracking at one time. If I track drums, bass, guitar player, guitar player in the control room, guitar amp is in isolation room, and the tracking room is a drummer by himself. So I just have a small rolling desk with a little mixer on it that is for monitoring. And so I have a single wire going to that, which is actually a DB25 connector cable. And so that can roll around the room very easily and not put a bunch of wires.
It's kind of like what I have. I have an old antique desk, and the headphone box just happened to slip right in there.
There you go.
And then the top is like a writing desk. It's like the original. Cool. It's like a vintage antique laptop desk, I guess.
Great.
But yeah, and then we custom built one cable to just like, if you have to custom build something, you can get that kind of, what do they call it? The Chinese handcuff, finger handcuff, stretchy stuff. And you can just run all the cables through that, and then you sort of have one cable.
Yeah, organizes it together. That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and side note, if you don't make your own cables, learn. Yeah. Learn how to make your own cables and all of that stuff. It's just so invaluable. As an audio engineer, oh my gosh, can you imagine if you had to buy every single cable?
Oh. Well, I mean, I've certainly bought plenty of cables, but I know that even just the cost of hiring somebody else to sort of wire up your patch bay for you, and that's a bit of a, there's two sides to that too, because it is very difficult to wire up a 90 point patch bay?
96.
96. Very, very well.
Yeah.
And so in those cases, if you do hire somebody to do it, they may actually do a really excellent job of it.
Yeah, there's certain things, like in construction of the studio we just did, I did all the framing myself, which was a mistake because I'm 49. Last studio I built, I was 36. And it also wasn't 10-foot ceilings. Much harder to do 10-foot ceilings framing-wise.
Right.
Much heavier. But when it came time to do the drywall, we hired a team. That's one of the few things that we actually hired someone else to come in, was to do all the drywall. And 2 layers of 5/8 drywall. I mean, I can't even lift a sheet, let alone put it on the ceiling and screw it in.
Oh yeah, that's a nightmare.
And so, yeah, do everything you can, at least learn how to drywall in that case, and then hire an expert to do it. Same thing goes with everything else in the studio. Learn how to fix or do or make or repair everything, but also know that, okay, you know how to do it. You're just not great at it. Let's hire someone else, but at least you know.
So I would say for the drywall thing, understand how drywall goes together, and understand the basics of studio design, even if you hire somebody, because you're the only one who's responsible for looking over the shoulder during this whole process and make sure it's done right.
Yeah.
If you want to be very particular about the construction, then you start to think about things like acoustic caulk and, staggered seams on drywall, if you're going to do double drywall and all this stuff. And construction, let's put it this way. In a day while you're off, running some errands, you can come home and quite a lot can get done with a professional team while you were gone. Mm-hmm. And if they didn't know about some of those details, it can get buried into the construction pretty quickly, and you could be in a little bit of trouble.
There's people that use the resonant channels, which is a metal bracket that they'll put on the studs and then attach the drywall to the channel, the metal channel. And what that does is it isolates the drywall from the stud, so you don't get sound transferring between the two. It decouples them. But you'll have a drywall contractor come in and then those channels are up and they're supposed to screw to those channels, but not too deeply where it screws all the way through to the wood, attaching the drywall to the wood. And if they don't know any better, they'll just do that. And everything that you spend all the time and money and effort to put those channels up is now gone.
Yeah.
Right. And like in my case, I built room inside a room. So my rooms are completely decoupled from the finished oversized garage that it's built into. And so I'm already decoupled. So I didn't use things such as that because I'm decoupled already.
And that's the funny thing about studio design when you begin to understand, or soundproofing, as far as making sure sound doesn't go from one space to the other. It's really, in a way, it's much simpler than you think.
Yeah.
It's as simple as like if you have a house and you close the doors on a bedroom and then there's a hallway and then you close the door on the other bedroom, you're going to discover that, generally speaking, the two bedrooms are isolated from each other. But if you just have two bedrooms and there's just one wall between them, then generally speaking, you're going to discover that the walls are very thin.
Yeah, it's simply understanding that sound waves are an energy that has to change its type of energy and form and such when it goes from one material to another. So when it's going through the air, the sound waves are one way. The minute they hit drywall, which is a plaster, it has to change into a different type of energy to go through that. And then on the other side of that, let's say is a stud, it has to change to a different type of energy to go through that stud. And then it comes out the other side of it and there's airspace. It has to change its energy again. Every time it does that, you're knocking it down big time. So, and then also the things are absorbing that sound and rattling and shaking. So like a drywall will start moving like a Kusa guitar body moves when it has sound hit it. And so that's where the decoupling happens, because if you have drywall, stud, and then drywall on the other side of it, or it's an actual room on the next side, that drywall on the other side is going to basically echo the sound right through because it's carrying the sound waves through, it's rattling through. If it's decoupled because you have two completely separate walls that aren't touching through the ceiling connection, through the floor connection, nothing. You are totally isolated two different walls. There's no way for the rattling part to go through there. You simply just have the sound waves that have to travel straight through and change their form as they go through these different materials, including air, which is great.
Air is a great sound blocker. Great isolator.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Well, let's take a break for a moment. We'll come back in for the jam session and dig into some more of these topics and let's talk about just recording cool records.
Cool.
Rockstar, is a reminder that we have links to what we're talking about here with Tim in the show notes. If you're on your mobile device, just click through. If you're on the website, just go to rsrockstars.com, search for Tim Dolbear, and you get the blog post. And then we have a YouTube playlist of some of Tim's works and records, and we'll be talking about those in just a moment. We'll see you guys in just a minute for the jam session. Are you using a Mac in your recording studio? Are you tired of feeling like the studio setup you worked so hard to create is becoming obsolete too quickly? Wouldn't it feel great to have a trusted friend to help you keep your existing Mac and studio setup current and relevant so that you can focus on the thing you love most, which is making great music? Well, now you can rely on OWC, Otherworld Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, whose mission it is to help you get the most mileage out of your existing Mac. Whether you need to upgrade your RAM, install an SSD drive, add more connectivity, or simply find a great used Mac that's ready to rock, OWC will help take your studio far into the future with a vast library of DIY install videos, 24/7 friendly support, and free shipping in the US on most items over $49. Why get frustrated and ditch your existing computer when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. If you want to capture every nuance of a great performance in your studio, then you need to start with a microphone that is crafted with great care and attention to detail. JZ Mics in Riga, Latvia designs amazing sounding microphones that are handcrafted with jeweler's precision to bring you incredible detail in your recordings. At the heart of JZ microphones is the unique Golden Drop capsule design, which uses a lighter, faster diaphragm that delivers great clarity and fidelity while avoiding distracting colorations and and Distortions. Make sure to check out the Vintage Series V67 and V11 with Class A discrete amplifier circuitry, extremely low self-noise, and advanced built-in shock mount technology to bring a classic, expensive vintage sound to your studio for an affordable price. Jay-Z offers a 5-year warranty, free shipping to the US, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, for a limited time, you can use the coupon code ROCKSTAR to get 50% off their Vintage Series microphones. I got one. You're hearing my voice right now on the V67. Wouldn't it feel great to have one of these in your studio? Go to jzmic.com or click the link in the show notes below. Hey Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Tim Dolbear, joining us, talking about making records, opening his new studio, Eclectica Studios here in Nashville, and studio design, and we're going to kind of get into some record making stuff. So, ready to jam, dude?
Yeah, let's do this.
What about your control room in your new studio? What are some things, and maybe begin with some of the pain points you had from previous studios that you were hoping to improve on with the new setup?
Yeah, so when I first started, I was kind of trained to produce in the classic sense, not like a music producer that makes beats, you could say, but like record producer coming out of Keith Olsen camp. Kind of that mindset where you're doing everything, and I have a music degree, so I'm helping out with that stuff and blah blah blah. So it was really about recording and having people in and recording. And so I always had a studio that had a very untraditional setup where the control room and live room were separated by a pair of French doors. So you could open up the French doors and you have a giant, figure 8 type rooms, you could say, because they're connected with a small waist in the middle, you could say. And it was a great workflow like that. But over the years, over the last 10 years, I've really gotten known as someone who can take a recording that was recorded in a less than ideal situation and mix it and have it releasable. And I'm a fixer and a mixer, and so I get a lot of work in, and the vast majority of my work is stuff where it's just me alone in the control room. So this time when I did the control room build, we're the opposite of most studios, where we have our overdub room is 15 by 15-ish, like we talked about. And if I need bigger than that, I'm just going to go to Ocean Way or Blackbird or somewhere else. There's a million rooms in this town I can go work out of if I need to track bigger and more at the same time. So my whole entire existence was, let's build a big control room. So my control room's now 23 feet by 15 feet, basically, with 10-foot ceilings. So it's this big, grandiose control room for one man working, with everything designed for the sound in the one spot to be perfect. And You mean sound coming from the speakers? Correct.
So the listening position.
Exactly. Listen position is absolutely, everything is perfect.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what it takes or what considerations you put into having a really great sounding listening position?
Listening position, it goes back to 6 or 7 years ago. For a little while, I was a product specialist for Sequoia digital audio workstations. So, which meant that they would send me around to different studios in North America to teach them how to use Sequoia DAWs. Most of them are mastering studios. So it's mostly mastering guys using Sequoia DAWs. And I'm one of the few people that uses it for everything. And so they brought me on board as a product specialist.
You use it for recording, multi-track, and everything, really?
Everything.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. I have a Pro Tools set up, and I use Sequoia for everything. We'll just leave it at that.
Right.
I use it for absolutely everything. And it does everything. Everything's built into it. You could literally just have it and nothing else. But anyway, so I was at this studio in Montreal. I taught at McGill. Is that the college in Montreal?
Yep, Montreal.
Okay.
Yep.
And they had told me, you got to go by Le Mastering Lab, the Mastering Lab, or the Le Mastering Studio, which is up there. And I can't remember the engineer's name. He does all of the big records in Canada, like Celine Dion and people like that. And they said, you got to go and you have to listen to his system. So I went and met with him and sat down, and he uses Sequoia, if I remember correctly. And that's why I was there, or able to get in so easy, I should say. And I sat down and I'm like, they told me I have to hear your setup. He goes, oh, sure. What do you want to hear? And he said, do you want to play something off your phone? I'm like, well, no, play me like a 96K, nice file. Give me something open, good imagery, good everything, just something really nice that really kind of shows off your system. And he played this kind of world jazz type of a song. And he hit play, and after about 2 seconds, I pooped myself. I just couldn't believe what I heard, and it changed my life. It's a defining moment in my entire life of audio, was sitting there and listening, or I should say sitting there looking forward, and this performance, this music was floating in space in front of me, in a three-dimensional space that's also high and low, everything there. I couldn't hear the speakers. All that I had was this image in front of me, this perfect sonic image. I couldn't believe it. I just died right there. I'd never heard anything like it. And so I actually wrote a blog posting about it. So if you find my blog, you can see pictures and read about it. Now, his studio, of course, was designed and was like, hundreds of thousands of dollars to design it. It's underground in a basement and of a high-rise building. It's way underground, meaning. And he has the top-of-the-line focal system with subs and everything and blah, blah, blah. And it calculated out to like $375,000 in speaker.
Did you say Focal?
Focal,
that those ones? Okay, great.
So whatever their top-of-the-line was. And it begs the question for another discussion of, well, if you're mastering on those, no one's ever going to listen to anything close to being that. So is that really the right system to even master on? Isn't it too much at that point? But that's a whole nother question.
Everybody's got a phone. You can always go check it on the phone after if you want.
So I'm like, okay, I'm using the Neumann K&H speakers, which are great speakers, super clear, great detail, love them. How come I don't have this type? And obviously I'm not going to get exactly what he had, but I can certainly get better. So I started researching it, which really brought my control room together. I had always made it so the control room's very symmetrical. There's angles. Everything's at 17 to 20% angles, so you don't have flutter echoes. But the speaker placements are symmetrical in the room, meaning that one is not 3 feet from one wall and 4 feet, and the other one's 4 feet from its closest wall. They're, the left and right speaker are both exactly to within a millimeter of the same distance from the side walls and the wall behind them. And so everything's super symmetrical in the room. My listening position, where my chin is, I would measure to a spot on the desk right underneath my chin, and it was exactly the same distance. Everything's measured, so they are absolutely symmetrical to where I'm sitting in the sweet spot.
Now, how hard is it to maintain symmetry once you just start actually using the studio? You're going to make music in there. You put a guitar to your left and set it on a guitar stand. Are you like, oh man, I can't put the there now?
No. But if someone comes up and stands next to me, you hear the whole room just die on one side of your head. Just like if me right now, I'm sticking my hand about a foot away from my ear, your entire room sounds completely different because it's blocked. So those things.
Wait, does it sound better? Should I permanently install your hand right there in my control room?
If I do both sides, I got it. Actually, it's kind of cool.
All right. So, let's talk about that later.
I'll just come and stand here for you at every session. Small fee. So it's one of those things. Now, everything's measured out perfectly. It starts then getting really stupid. So I'll get to the stupid part in a second. My end result was when I finally got everything measured out so it's all symmetrical and I'm in my sweet spot, when I play stuff for people, they poop themselves. And I have people all the time sit and listen to stuff going, I can't believe what this sounds like. Your system is just stunning. And that's how I feel. I can't listen to music in my car anymore, and it's just ruined because it sounds so wonderful sitting right there. Now, the things that it begs questions for is if you're sitting in your sweet spot and you turn your head like 5 degrees or 10 degrees to one side, your right ear is now closer to that speaker than your left ear is to the other speaker because you've now shifted your head.
Right.
Now, how does that screw of it? It does, but whatever. We can only do so much. But then I start thinking, okay, what about the sound that bounces off my shoulders and goes into my ear? What about off the back of my chair? If I have a high, tall chair that's solid, that's bouncing off too. So all of these things, at some point you have to draw a line because you'll kill yourself. it just gets to be too much. So the speakers are placed properly, everything's measured out, and then everything else is just a variable that you live with because you can only do so much.
Right, totally. I mean, you can have people moving around. You have to move around. You got to reach over and change the volume knob.
Well, when someone sits down to listen at my setup, it's my console in front of me it hits me in my chest or my rib cage. I sit up straight, and that's where I listen. I'm always like how I'm sitting right now. If you could see a picture of me on this podcast, how I'm sitting right now is how I always sit at my console, back straight, up, sitting upright, no slouching. So when I have someone come into my studio, I'm like, oh, okay, let me play you back your mix or whatever, and they sit down at the chair and then they slump way back, and they're just like way back. I always make them sit up. Like, no, sit up. You got to sit up. And
Do you hit them with a ruler?
Basically, yeah, because it's like, oh, you're missing out. It's made to sound perfect like this, and it will still sound good there. It sounds good back on the couch at the back of the room. It sounds good everywhere. But if you're here, you might as well hear it right.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, and so no, do you also? I know that this is a new studio that's coming together now, but do you anticipate that you will still like get up and walk around the room and listen in different locations and stuff like that? Do you still think that'll be valuable?
Always.
Maybe talk about why that's valuable.
Always, because different parts of the room, no matter how perfect the room is, it's going to reveal different things in the mix. There was a spot in the Austin studio where I would lean up against the entrance to the live room, the French doors. They were recessed or set back into the wall, so I could lean up against the wall right there. And for some reason, right there was a big bass boost, and just standing right there, it was like a 3 dB bump at about 40, and so I would always listen there. Is it too much? I go sit on the couch. How's it sound here? How's it sound over here? Sitting over by my laptop, because when you listen to music, no one sits and listens to music anymore in one spot. I mean, they might have at one point put a record on, sat on their couch and just sat there and listened to a whole record. But now everyone's moving around. And so I want to hear it in every point of the room. And it should sound great in every point of the room, even though it sounds different. Yeah. I also check all my mixes on a set of earbuds, a set of headphones, and a set of Bose computer speakers.
I probably got the Bose computer speakers sitting right behind you, but the earbuds I think are very valuable. I actually haven't figured out how to get them into earbuds, although I can stream it to my phone, so I guess I could do it like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was always wondering if you could just like plug the iPhone headphones into the, the headphone jack of your regular old headphones.
Yeah, and I got some Sennheiser earbuds that were like $35.
Yeah.
Which work great. And they're 1/8-inch jack. I just plug them into a quarter, and then I plug them into the headphone amp I use is from Crimson Audio, which is actually my brother-in-law's audio company. He makes a headphone amp that's just stupidly clean and clear sounding.
Cool.
And
what are some takeaways from earbud listening?
So that's what I was going to say. Each thing reveals its own thing. And the hard part is if you check your mixes on different systems and you don't know how to check your mix on different systems, it'll totally screw you up. And so the thing that I go after is with if you take your mix that sounds perfect in your studio and you put it in your car and you go, oh man, it's really muffled sounding and it's really this and it's really that, and then you go in and you start making adjustments to it for that. It's like, well, no, wait. Does your car, when you pop in your favorite CD from so-and-so, does it sound muffled in your car but sound crystal clear on your studio setup? You want your mix to sound in your car the same way that other releases do. You don't want it to sound like it just sounded like in your studio. And that's where people get screwed up is, okay, in the studio, it's crisp and clear. I'm expecting it now to sound crisp and clear on my stereo in my car. I'm expecting it to sound exactly like that on headphones. That's the wrong way to listen to it. Each system has its own presentation to it, right, and you need to know what its presentation is. So earbuds, I hate. They sound terrible, which is fine. They work great. Whenever I use earbuds, I'm sitting on an airplane. There's no way it's going to sound good anyway, so it's just noise. But it's about the song. And so with earbuds, that's how I check for S's. Too much S'ing, either cymbals or mouth S'ing, because earbuds reveal the spectrum of 2.5 up through 8 and 9K for S'ing really good. So if you have too much S'ing, you'll instantly know it on earbuds. Just like my headphones, which are some KRK.
Those I've got the KRK 1200s or something. They're sort of like light. They're not super expensive.
2,400, and they were like $160.
Yeah, that
maybe
might be
something like.
close.
Anyway, they're good. I like. They're a little bass light, believe it or not. But I know what they sound like, and I know what other things sound like on them. And on them, I check for the fact of it being bass light. If my mix sounds bass heavy in them, or if it sounds boomy, then I know my mix has too much bass. Yeah. Just like if I go to my Bose, anything that's boomy will become 100 times boomy in those Bose. And so I know if I pop those on, boom.
Yeah, the Bose and then my little KRKs, I find they're wonderful because you put a mix up and immediately you're like, man, those sound like crap. And then you're like, dang it, my mix sounds like crap.
Exactly.
It's like there's this like low end thuddy muddiness that they just reveal right away. And then you're like, you got to really go carve out the low mids and be selective.
And that's what all people who have like studio monitors where they have like, okay, I have 3 different sets of studio monitors. I have my Genelecs and I have my Focals and I have my I'm like, well, all of those sound bitchin'. So how are you checking your mix on bitchin'? You know, you should have
sounds good in bitchin' mode.
Yeah, bitchin', good, and crappy. That's a great way to check your mixes and see how they come across. Not all fantastic. You know, the mix sounds good on all of them. No shit. Okay.
Well, I remember, so I keep bringing this up, telling stories about working with Tom Lord Alge, because basically it was because when I was starting this out, this was my first opportunity to be in a studio with a pro mixer.
Yeah.
And he had a Sony mini disc player off to the side. Yeah. And he would always just like, you know, send the mix over there and we'd listen. And he was always doing that. And, you know, I think at the time I thought like, oh, that must be the perfect, you know, alternate listening thing. And I think you learn later, it's like, that's the whole point. You don't want a perfect anything. You want just something that's funky in a way that you can get used to. And he would, you know, he said that was real valuable. He also had another interesting takeaway. He was like, if you find something and it becomes one of your tools, buy 5 of them if you can, because it's going to break and you're going to need it, you know. That was good advice. If you can get 5 of something, you can get 5 of a plugin.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
And then there was another takeaway. I remember, I think it was Dave Pensato talking about checking on earbuds. And he made an interesting comment about how, you know, people listen to records on earbuds now. And so things that you might have done with panning and speakers might not work for you in earbuds. And so that was a good takeaway.
Bingo. And on headphones and earbuds, that's when I'm checking it. And honestly, like the Bose, in my studio setup, my headphones and my earbuds and my main speakers, I'm sitting in the same chair in the same spot. I actually kick the chair away and stand up so I can stretch my legs while I'm listening to the headphones and I'm making final adjustments. But the Bose are sitting on the other side of the room next to my laptop because they're technically my laptop speakers. And so they have 2 inputs on them. One input gets sent from the console. And so, you know, I listen to it from far away. So I'm 10 feet away at least from them, and they're just kind of playing because that's how you listen to those. You're not supposed to listen to them in any type of a nice situation. Right. So it's also, those are the ones that I know and they work for me, you know, but you know, it could be totally something different for someone else. And also it was easy to route to all of those. Super easy for me to route. I just use an A/B switch to send my mixes to my alt speakers and then flip through them from there.
Yeah, I think the Bose, I wish I could remember the model number. They're probably right behind you, but it's the split pair left and right. I think the left one has the volume knob on it.
They're like super.
They've been around
known.
since the early 2000s. And they sort of have a built-in compression too. If you turn them up too much, you got to watch out for that too.
You can't hit them. If you hit them, you'll start hearing compression, and it's the kind of compression that you can hear. It's not lovely.
And you might even think it's cool and think it's on your mix, but it's not.
It's not happening on your mix, and you don't want anything like that happening on the mix.
Well, in our case, we actually did. We were doing some 4-track recordings of the band rehearsing in a rehearsal space. and we've listened to them through that. It's like, oh, it sounds badass. Then later you get home and you realize, no, that compression was actually there.
That's what I mean. It's like, if you want that, it needs to be on your mix. It can't be on a listening device.
Yeah.
You know, I don't mind a listening device coloring it and it's making it so I can hear the S-ing better.
Right.
But I certainly don't want it changing the overall dynamic feel to the whole thing. Oh.
You want your alternate reference listening to make it sound worse, not better.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's talk about some of the records that you've done.
Sure.
One of the ones in the list that I put together on YouTube, Adrian Connor Belligerent. It's a great rock sound, but it's also very soft, the tone. It's like rocking out, but it's like I feel like I could lay my head on it, and it's gentle at the same time in a cool way, and I like that a lot. And I wondered, if you had any comments about getting in a production, in a recording, a mix, getting a band to rock, but avoiding harsh.
That one's actually, I mixed that one. I mixed and
great.
So the drums
I could make it sound harsh in 2 seconds if I mixed it if I wanted to.
Exactly.
So how do you avoid that?
This was the drums were tracked in Brooklyn by a drummer out there. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. And then she tracked all the rest of the stuff at her own place and brought me the tracks to do the mixing. And I don't know. I have a feeling one of the main things that you're hearing that makes it sound not harsh is because I print everything to tape.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm mixing to tape. My mix bus is very, very specific, and I could just work in Sequoia and do everything in the box and put a couple plugins on the end and get probably a decent result. But I've really spent a lot of time picking out gear that fits my taste and what I like, and I get hired because of my taste. I was hanging with Michael Romanowski a while ago, and we were talking. Yeah, we were talking all about we get hired for our taste. It's like if you want me to mix your album, it's because you like my work and you like the way my taste, the way I present stuff, the way I like it. If you like Pantera and you hate Squeeze, then you probably don't want me to mix your album. Because I love the way like that Squeeze album or Supertramp, Breakfast America sounds. I like that type of sound, but like buzzsaw metal, I love to listen to, but I don't like to mix it. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Well, I think I want to get back to your stereo mix bus, but a good takeaway from what you just said is don't shy away from who you are as an individual, what your taste is, what you like, why you're different from everybody else.
Oh, find out what
makes
that,
you know?
It's the same thing with producing an artist. Find out what makes them different, what's unique about them, and exaggerate it. That's what you do as a producer. You don't try to make them sound like everyone else. You go, oh my gosh, there's this unique quality that they might actually even hate, but it's something that's endearing, that touches you, and exaggerate it. Bring that out. That's the most important thing. It's the same thing with my taste of music. It's like when I get stuff through, there's, Angela, who's here, asked me a while ago, Angela. We were talking about something, and I said, there's some very specific things I do in every mix that are part of my taste that when I hear one of my mixes, I can tell it's one of my mixes because certain things are happening. Yeah. And so she was asking me about what they are, and I won't go into what all of them are, but one of my favorite things is I love having reverb move. Now, if I'm mixing something very dry, kind of like that Belligerent song is a dry, in your face kind of thing. Yeah. That's one thing. But even in that, there's going to be a little bit of verb in it. And I always have verb move. It always goes somewhere. It doesn't just everywhere. It's more on one side than the other. I love long pre-delays, things like that.
Like a chorus on a reverb return, that kind of thing move, or no?
No, move. Oh, sorry. Yeah, not like a modulation type move, but like if you listen to it, you'll notice that everything trails off to the left side.
Right. Okay. All right.
As opposed to trailing off evenly right and left.
That makes me feel so much better about when I do that by accident. I can't figure out why it's doing that in my mix.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is naturally things will happen too. Is a good trick is if you have, say, bass guitar, drums, and a vocal, and the guitar is off a little bit to the right, naturally the verb will sound like it's trailing off to the left because the guitar is masking what's happening on the right. If you have two guitars and one's on the right and one's on the left, on your aux return for your reverb, I don't know what plugin you'd have to use on Pro Tools to do this. For me, I click one button, it does it. But I flip the left and right side returns on the augs in Sequoia so that things that are panned all the way to the right, when it goes into the augs and comes out the augs, it's flipped. So all that verb, instead of being on the right side, being masked by that same guitar that created that verb, it's echoing back on the left side.
Yeah. It's like a classic mix move too in old recordings where they'll have like sense. The chamber return is panned to the other side, or in some of the old jazz recordings, you'll actually hear the bleed of the instrument coming through the other mic.
Exactly. And so that type of movement, a good example would be listen to some old Billy Joel. There's a couple songs, some old Billy Joel stuff like, I don't know, pick a song, some of his early hits.
Piano Man?
Not that early.
Right.
So like late 70s, kind of before he went Uptown Girl, back when he was good. Moving Out, Big Shot.
What's the title of Love You Just the Way You Are? Isn't that Billy Joel or is that?
Yeah, but more of the poppy stuff, not the ballady stuff.
You shouldn't ask me.
Okay, good. Okay, sorry. But listen to any of those types of recording, you'll notice if you're listening on headphones, all of the reverb is on the left side. Almost all of it. It's like there's nothing else, and it's like a 4-second trail. I really think they were using probably like an EMT 250, which if you come out the rear outputs, because it's quadraphonic, come out the rear, it'll naturally do that, and it has the same tonal quality. So I think they actually were using those little R2D2 units on some of those albums.
Right on.
Maybe. You have to ask them. But
those things are pretty cool. We were talking about that recently. I forgot what that was.
I'd love to have a real one, but, eBay, they want like 20 grand for one. I'm like, well, you can get the UAD plugin, and I have as many instances as I want. It sounds great.
Yeah, but maybe just use one instance, or maybe two.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to use 20.
I had a weird thing happen during building of the studio. So when we just finished the drywall, my control room is big. My live room is tiny comparatively, a 22, 23 foot long and a 15 foot long room. And my live room is really bright sounding when all that I had was drywall up. Okay. There's nothing but drywall and a couple tools on the ground. Okay. And it was really bright and had like a 4-second trail. Just
like an echo chamber.
Yeah, I actually said to Angela at one point, I said, you know what? Maybe I won't ever track anyone here and we'll just leave this as a chamber.
Did you grab an impulse response while you had the chance?
I thought about it, but I didn't.
I've never even done that, so I wouldn't even. It'd take me a day of just figuring out how, researching it.
Exactly. So we put in a real short Berber carpet in the control room, which is something I loved from 2 studios ago. I brought into this one. And so the control room had for a minute there when there was nothing on the walls but drywall and the carpet on the ground, had a very dark, like 1.5 second kind of goo. And I've always mixed a bright reverb, a short bright reverb, and a longer dark reverb in my mixes. Just usually that's a good starting point for something. And then I'll tweak from there, which means you have the bright and then you have the ooh, which is very natural sounding. Sounds like the way it happens in the real world. The high end drops off and you get a little bit of a rolling rumble to a natural reverb. But in these 2 rooms, if you clapped your hands or walked across the room or something, you could hear the live room echoing after the shorter, dark control room reverb. So, and it was shorter and darker, and so it was the complete opposite. So that's something I want to start trying is a very short, warm reverb for the short one and a very bright, long reverb for the long reverb. Total opposite. It sounded killer in life. I'd never heard that in real life, but because all of a sudden I had these 2 rooms in tandem or working together, it was amazing sounding. I'm like, wow, that's cool hearing it backwards.
Well, I guess the backwards version here is I've got a dead room and the gallery, which is the big live room.
Yeah.
And if I mic everything up in the dead room, it sounds totally dead. The drums, for example, sounds super tight. But then if you just open the door and put a room mic in the other room, it's like this almost fabricated reverb sound, even though it's real.
Yeah.
And then it's pretty remarkable because you could just simply mute the room mic and it's straight back to dead again. It's like even having the door open, you don't.
Exactly.
None of that liveness comes back in.
We had a bathroom, a tiled bathroom in our studio in Southern California before we moved to Austin. And I would always leave that one cracked open and put mics in there. And that was I called it Tim's water closet. And, typical trick. At Goodnight LA Studios, we had a room off the main recording room, which was full of exercise equipment, but we put mics in there. It was a bright reverb type room. Same thing, cracked door, drums would leak in. You get a cool sound to it. Well, when I moved from LA, I'm like, well, I'm going to lose my water closet. Tim's water closet will be no more. So before I tore everything down, I modeled it. And this was in 2006. I wasn't real hip to impulse response. So I simply just found a verb that sounded like the verb as close as I could get it. I spent a week or so just trying to hone it in and make it sound perfect. And I had the trail correct. I had the tone, the brightness, everything correct, but something didn't sound right. And I said, And I put a compressor on the reverb return. So the compressor actually was after the reverb. You would have the reverb hit, and that triggered the compressor, and then the compressor let go when it dropped down far enough. And it sounds exactly like the original Tim's Water Closet. I now have it in plug-in form, and I use it. And that is my fast, short drum reverb on every single mix you can find that I've done in the last 10 or 15 years.
I've been really surprised to discover that a compressor after the reverb gives you the sound you're looking for on drums.
Funky.
The room sound that you're feeding the snare to, where you want it to just go like, bam,
Now I wonder why that ended up making it. Is it the natural compression we get in our ears? Like if we walk into that room and we hear, there's a natural compression happening of that snare drum just smacking into that room and all the reverb happening. So is it emulating that? I wonder.
Yeah, I don't even know if my needle's ever moving. I put the 1176 on there or something. It might not even move the needle, but it gets it like
I'm moving.
It's the mid range too. It just kind of makes it speak a little bit. I was gonna crack a joke. You're talking about Tim's water closet. I was like, yeah, well, it's not next to the control room because you had to move it into the control room because everybody's so busy pooping themselves listening to your new monitors in there.
Oh, I'm flush.
Cool, man. All right. Well, so there's another record you did called Empty Your Pockets. And that's in the YouTube playlist as well. And it's got this great tight space quality to the production. And it's probably what you were just talking about. But I wanted to ask, if you want to elaborate more on how we can keep our productions minimal and tight, and what kind of things get in the way of keeping a production sounding like that.
Cool. So that one's the opposite. That one, I did everything on it except for I didn't write the lead vocal and I didn't sing the lead vocal. I co-wrote the song with Anita Brown and for her album, and I had that's my drum sample library, which is made with my studio drum kit. So it's actually, I have this enormous drum sample library that I use, which is all my kit recorded my way. So I treat it the same way I treat real drums. And
so it's your real drum kit that you recorded, turn in your own sample library, and now you can play it back. That's fun. I've wanted to do that here, and I've only sort of done that.
You got to do it because it's like snare drums. I have like 19 velocity levels of snare.
Yeah.
Actually, there's like 6 velocity levels, but there's 19 samples total. So that way, at each velocity level, there's many different. They all sound different, and they're all real. And the room mics are able to be mixed in. And so, like, if I re-trigger your kick drum on your song, like the mix comes into me and the kick drum sucks, I just re-trigger it using Drumagog, and I trigger my kick drum sample library, which is off of my kit, and I can do anything I want with that kick because then, it's a great sounding kick. But anyway, that one, so it's a drum programmed, but the cymbals are all played live. So I program out the drums, and then I come back and I record a cymbal kit. As in, I sit there and I don't play kick and snare because I'm not a good enough drummer, but I can play cymbal kit, and then edit, or as they say, Pro Tools it to death to make it sound like I'm okay. But then the live cymbals and hi-hats and rides and stuff make you think it's a real drum because there's that movement and niceness to it.
I think it worked for the Bee Gees' Saturday Night Fever too, right? They started with the loop and then just added the percussion and cymbals, hi-hats and stuff over that.
Exactly. I think Aldo Nova did that on his stuff. I don't know. We have to check. Anyway, the guitar was my scratch guitar part for the most part on that song. But the guitar solos I came back and did, I just wanted them to be just super minimal and just sarcastic kind of bends to them. Scrunch up your face kind of bent nose kind of thing. And then bass was just straightforward, and vocal, I kept it super clean and open, as you can tell when you hear it. And then I slammed it to tape. I pegged the tape so hard that my VU meter got stuck at one point. I had to tap it. Just slammed it. And that's probably 50-60% of the sound of that song is the tape just saturating and just great goodness.
You know, that's another, it reminds me of another takeaway from working with Tom Lord-Alge is we'd look over at the mix tape deck and he would just be pinning those needles. Yeah. And he was just like, yeah, it sounds great, you know?
That's the thing. I mean, that's like a super important thing too, is I don't care what it looks like. I remember back in like 2002 or something like that, mixing in my early days when I was a young lad and boosting a frequency on my EQ. I think it was on like the Renaissance EQ from Waves back then, or maybe it was the early Cambridge EQ from UAD. But boosting it because it's a graphic type of a look to it and saying to myself, oh, that's too much. I can't do that much. Because I'm looking at it going, oh, that's too much. I can't boost it up. What a stupid ass thing to think or say, you know, in audio. It's like, what does it sound like? How does it sound? Yeah. And so that's probably the best thing about analog gear is don't look at anything that's happening on it. It's all about ears at that point. Well, plugin, you get so caught up with the graphic user interface. You know, my favorite thing to use on most channels is the channel strip, which is the 88 RS from UAD, because there are no graphs. There's no nothing. You just simply twist knobs until it sounds right. And that's how it should be. I remember once I contacted George Massenberg and asked him a question about overhead placement. And I had mentioned in there, it was an email, and I had mentioned in there that I go, it doesn't look right. And his thing was, well, who cares what it looks like? How does it sound? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's a good point. And that's really, it's something I think about often is don't use your eyes. Don't mix with your eyes. Don't listen with your eyes. Don't do none of that. I mean, for a while I had a button I'd hit and my DAW would drop off the screen and I'd be looking at just my desktop, a blank screen, you could say, where I can't see anything. So I could just listen. Yeah, I think that's really important. I have my trick for doing that. I have a trackpad for the Mac, and if you take 3 fingers and you just swipe to one side, it just pulls up like the blank screen where you can have your widgets or whatever. Yeah. I just make sure I don't put a bunch of colorful widgets on there. Yeah, because you get distracted. I don't want to be distracted by that either. This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you are ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. These techniques would work for you in whichever DAW you are using right now. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads to mix in your own studio and even include in your mixing portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now and look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Okay, cool. So a takeaway from you describing the stuff that went into the Empty Your Pockets production, I would suggest that maybe what is part of making it sound so tight and powerful with the drums too is also because you separated the cymbals, you had much more control over it. I mean, definitely cymbals, when they get away from you in a drum sound, you can really beat yourself up wanting the drums to be stereo better. Overhead. I'd record all the cymbals at once, so it's like a real kit with a stereo overhead, if that's what you mean. Well, no, I just mean also like when you play the cymbals at the same time with the drums, sometimes those cymbals can get away with you as you try and mix the drums to be more powerful and compress them and stuff. Yes, and there's nothing worse than getting a drummer in there who just slams his cymbals but drops his stick on a snare drum like thunk. Yeah. You know? Yeah. He doesn't understand playing the drum kit as a dynamic. It's a single instrument and the whole thing needs to sound uniform. Another funny takeaway I've noticed tracking with drummers sometimes is they'll go to the chorus and they'll actually play the
snare a little quieter in the chorus.
Yes.
And then I'm like, dude, you need to come listen to this. You're actually playing a little quieter instead of like, at the point where it needs to like either at least be as loud as the verse,
Yes.
if not louder. All right. Well, so let's see. What else do I want to talk to you about?
You asked me about the mix bus.
Oh yeah, mix bus. Yeah, thank you for reminding me.
I mix completely in the box because of Sequoia, except for my mix bus. I have nothing on the mix bus. It goes straight out 2 channels. It goes out a Mytek DSD 192 D to A converter. Comes out of that and goes into a Great River mastering EQ. Out of the mastering EQ into the Variable Mu mastering edition with the T-Bar mod from Manley. And then the output of that is my drive for my JH110B MCI tape machine. And from there, it goes, if you don't know much about pro tape machines, if you hit, play and record, so we're in record mode, the sound goes in, it gets recorded onto the tape, and then as the tape goes by the head, it moves over 1 inch and is then instantly read by the playback head. And the playback then sends it back out of the machine. It's a fraction of a second later, but it doesn't matter because that then goes in and gets printed back at 96K into the session, and I capture it. So you hear some interviews where people will talk about, oh, you don't do anything in your mix bus, don't pre-master it, don't do this, blah, blah. And I don't think I'm doing anything that's necessarily pre-mastering by any means because I'm a mastering engineer too, and I understand all of that.
And you're listening to what this sounds like while you're working.
Exactly. It's all part of it, and I'm mixing into all of this stuff as it is. I have an overall EQ, which is a curve that I've developed over the last 20 years for the high and low, and a lot of people use it as basically kind of a Pultec-y boost, high-low kind of smiley face. But then I have the 2 middle bands, which I use on every single mix. They're different. Those are my low mids and my high mids / highs. And I can adjust them accordingly, especially because once it starts, the tape's rolling, I might need to boost a little bit of 5K to get a little clarity back in of, that has disappeared on tape. So stuff like that, I might cut out a little 200, some of the low boxy tones or something. But all of those I start dialing that stuff in when I'm listening on all the other speakers too.
Right.
And then the variable mu, it just sits at the same setting. I never change it other than the output that drives the tape. And the tape is simply just, do I want it to compress? Do I want it to just smooth out everything? You were mentioning that song just has this like warmth to it.
Like a softness.
Softness.
It's nice. Comforting.
Yeah, but yet it's like belligerent.
Yeah.
And really the tape machine, when I hit record on the tape machine and I'm listening to something go through the tape machine, it's absolutely amazing how everything just sounds like a record. And my JH110, I completely restored myself, did everything myself, huge 4-month-long endeavor. But I figured I had to maintain it. I should know everything about it. And so I learned everything about it. And then I also used a mod that Chris Mara put out, which is the API 2520 op amps on the inputs and outputs of both channels.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So it has 1 on the input of each channel and 2 op amps on the outputs. And so I can literally, if I just want that API type of mid 40 punch drive kind of sound, I can just monitor the input and not hit tape. If I want tape, I then have it go to tape also. So I have a couple different flavors the tape machine gives me, but overall it just sounds wonderful. And everything I put through it just goes, better. It just sounds like a record now, and not like the kind of record, but like an album. It sounds like it's supposed to.
Now, does yours go down to 7.5 IPS as well?
It actually goes, I modded the inside of it. There's a dual speed, a high-low speed pin that you can move that will allow it to go down to 3 and 3.75.
Yeah, have you tried that out on a mix?
I have not on a mix, but I do a lot of transfers and recovery things for people where they'll send me stuff as 3.75, so I have to do it for that. I've tried 7.5 and I've tried 30, and there's something about the punch bump in the gut that you get from 15.
Yeah.
15 in ATR tape. I use ATR mastering tape for everything.
Okay, cool. So then that's a go-to tape that you can still get a hold of now.
Yes.
And any comments you want to make about just I mean, not to get too technical, but just about aligning a machine with ATR tape these days or anything?
Alignment's actually really easy. All my heads are new or like within 90% from JRF Magnetics, who's the only place that relapse heads and does all the head work for everybody that I know of. But as far as aligning, I do, because of the fact that I'm printing a mix to a tape and it's instantly being read back off that tape and captured into my computer, again, at a 96K stereo file, and there's my mix, boom, back in the digital world. I'm reusing tape because you can reuse tape over and over and over and over again. And until you start hearing, if you hear a drop out, then it's time to go. And I've had some tapes last a month. I've had some last 4 or 5 months. One, depending on how busy I am. And two, each piece of tape is just different. And so what I'll do is I have a long maintenance sheet that I do every month for the machine where I go through a bunch of stuff every month. Every year I take the entire machine apart and clean every connector and put it all back together. But every month I go.
You want to come over here and do that to mine?
Sure. Yeah. I charge, but I'll do it. Right. Absolutely. But
I'll start saving.
Yeah. So once a month I put on my alignment tape and I align it to that. And then I put my tape, the ATR tape that I'm using, and do an alignment to that. And then I print tones back onto the head of that. And then I use those tones for the rest of the month to align the machine from. So that way I'm not taking out my MLR tape. Is
MRL.
MRL tape.
Master reference level.
So I don't wear that out. I only use it once a month. And that way every day for alignment, I'm using what's called house tones, which is the tone that I printed at the top of that tape.
Yeah.
So I run those tones at the top and align the playback part, and then I align the recording part after that. I'm usually up and running in about 3-4 minutes.
You know, we lost that guy, the voice of the MRL tape in the past.
Really?
It's like 5-6 years ago, something like that. It might have been a little longer than that, but I remember hearing that he he passed on.
Oh, I have him on tape.
1 kilohertz.
Wait,
1
we
kilohertz.
all have him on tape.
320 nanometers per meter.
Yeah. So aligning is not a big deal. If I had a 24 track or 16 track like you had, I'm not sure how much I'd use it just because alignment would take forever.
Yeah.
But on a stereo machine like this, it's really fast. And
when I was in good form, top form, I could align it in an hour, something like that.
This is like 4 or 5 minutes.
If I was going to use the tape machine on a session, I would book a half a day the day before to go through, because there was always something.
I know.
It was like
I call it's like having an old car.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I love my 57 Chevy, or I love my old, fastback Mustang, but you're not sure if you're going to make it to the food store each day. So there's days where I've come out to start working, because my day is always I start mixing a new song after lunch. I mix all afternoon. In the evening, I prepare the song for the next day that I'll start at noon. And then in the morning, I open up the mix from that day before that I did between noon and dinner, and I do my final listen through and tweaks and all the other speakers and stuff like that. But if I turn on my tape machine and it's deciding to be a little demon, then I could kill a half hour to half a day trying to get it up and going. But that's just, it sounds so amazing and so good, and it's such a signature in what I deliver to my clients that I put up with it. And I know people listening to this are like, oh, I got a tape plug-in, and all these famous people say it sounds just as good and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't sound like tape at all. It doesn't sound like tape. I have every single tape plugin. I've reviewed almost all of them for Mix Magazine, and they all do something special and cool and awesome. And I use those plugins, especially on individual tracks, for various different things. In fact, my favorite distortion plugin for vocals is the A800 Ampex tape plugin from UAD.
Okay, yeah.
It's A800.
Or 800, yeah.
It's that one. You just fry that one. Just crank it full blast, bring the output volume down, and it just sounds great on vocals. So, there's definitely uses for it, but it does not sound like tape.
Well, let's keep digging into that though. So, where are some other places, other instruments? I'm going to guess maybe drums and bass and stuff like that. Talk about just kind of go through your process a little bit of trying out the tape plugins on the individual tracks.
Yeah.
Maybe changing settings on them, stuff that's useful to know.
I think the main thing I use it for is over the top. If it's a plugin, I'll use it to add distortion. I'll use it to try to, the way it takes off transients is different than anything else. So like the ATR plugin from UAD and the Slate tape plugin. The Slate tape plugin to me sounded the closest to tape out of all of them.
Interesting. All right.
And it really has a great sound, in my opinion, if you turn the noise all the way down, because it was too much hiss. But the main thing I'll use it for, other than distortion, is to grab a hold of a transient. If I find I have something that's really spiky that I need to control, instead of putting a limiter on it and trying to brick wall it as fast as possible, I will do this, because whatever they're doing is a combination of a brick wall limiter and a saturation, and usually it sounds really nice.
Yeah. Fabrice is a smart guy.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. There's a lot of great programmers out there doing stuff, which is just great for us.
Yeah.
I mean, because I have a lot of analog gear, and a lot of it's really expensive, and of course I'd love to have more. But, the budgets of what people can pay for an album to be mixed and stuff, and then I have to pay for electricity, and I have to pay my mortgage and eat and survive and everything like that. Plugins are the way to go, It's
now,
like those tape plugins, you don't have to align them. Just like you don't ever have any of that. I have to retube my variable mu, and it's like $300 worth of tubes. And it's like $300 in this day and age in this business is a big consideration.
It's almost as much as retubing my SVT bass head.
Exactly. Exactly. And those types of things we think about when you own a business. If you're not doing this as a full-time thing, $300 to drop on this or that isn't that big of a deal. But if you're doing this full-time for a long time, you're like, okay, I need to buy a couple packs of strings, and you really think about it before you do it, as opposed to, if I had other income, it would be like, oh, just buy them.
Yeah. I'll tell you, one of the things that is just godsend for studios is Amazon. I love when I need something now. It used to be make a list. And Angela's laughing there too. She probably knows all about that.
Oh, we live on Amazon Prime. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
do they have Amazon Now here in Nashville?
I think so. I don't use it
because we had it in Austin. I could get guitar strings in an hour.
Wow.
Dropped off at the door.
There you go.
Yeah, it was rad.
Well, it used to be like I'd have to make a list of stuff, and then I'd think about it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to need a half day or a day that I call maintenance day.
Yeah.
And you drive all over town from store to store and hope they're open still, and But now you just like. You need batteries, you need studio supplies. You just pull out your phone, swipe it, and you just know it'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or in an hour if you want to do the now.
Angela takes care of all of she's basically the CTO.
I'm sure.
COO, Chief Operating Officer. She handles all the purchasing and everything like that. And I just send her a message. Need this, I need this. And she takes care of all of that. And it just shows up. And immediately, it's wonderful.
Well, you're welcome, Jeff Bezos. I'm sure you needed some more shout outs. Okay, let's talk about mixing and how you mix. Are you mixing through a console? Are you in Sequoia doing this stuff?
Right.
Do you start out with a template?
And actually, I like to say something about mixing too, because the hard part of my business model and what I have to deal with is, since 90% of my work is stuff that's recorded at other studios in the world, and usually not world-class studios with world-class musicians, because quite honestly, if you have a world-class studio record it and world-class musicians play on it, it's not that difficult to mix. You can throw the faders up and you're 99% of the way there. Everything else is just making that last polish happen. But the majority of stuff that I get in is challenging, and there's a lot of fixing to be done first. And so when I mix it and send it out and then it's published and put out there, it's really tough to grow in your business and get bigger clients in, because people don't know what you started with. And so they might listen to your mix and go, oh, it sounds good, but drums don't sound, I mean, they're a little this or that, or the cymbals are phasier. I didn't record them. I didn't have anything to do with it. I was at the mercy of what I'm dealing with, and you never know what you're going to start with. And that's a really tough business model to be in that I'm in. And I still haven't figured out a way around it other than you try to just always do your best work on it and hope the best stuff gets out there.
Well, you started out with, it's all about the song.
True.
And I would suggest that this topic, it's all about the artist. So the truth of the matter is that people pay attention because of the artist that is recorded.
Right.
And if they like that artist,
yes,
then they're listening, and then they're wondering who did it. And if you're the one who did it, then they know about you. If it's not an artist they care about, they never heard it in the first place.
There's a song that I think I sent it to you called To Hell with Texas. It was an artist out of Alaska who I mixed some songs for. And the recordings were absolutely difficult. That's a way to put it.
Right.
They were very difficult. And the artist is fantastic, but he didn't have anywhere to record up there. And it was very, very challenging. Very, 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 very challenging. And so I really went after kind of a Lumineers, kind of a dark, folksy, kind of rock, gritty kind of sound to it. For one, it fit the style. For two, it also helped mask a lot of the issues that they had. And he got 45,000 listens within like the first 3 or 4 days on Spotify. I mean, just tore it up. So again, it's just about the song. It was one of the worst recorded songs I've had to work on. And I mean, he knows how challenging they were. I mean, it's not a cut down on anybody. It was just really difficult. But the song is just great. The lyrics are fantastic. And it just worked because it's a great song.
And Rockstars, that's included in the YouTube playlist as well. Cool. Make sure you go check that out. You can just click right through.
So anyway, you were back. The question of template. I do have a mixed template, but the mixed template is not as in-depth as one may think. For instance, there's 48 tracks. Even though in Sequoia you can have up to 1,000. There's no limit type thing like you run into a Pro Tools. So there's 48 tracks. There's 16 buses and 16 augs. And it's not like in Pro Tools where an augs bus kind of thing. It's like an actual console type setup where your buses are actual buses, your aux sends are actual effects aux send type setups. And so I start with that. I can always expand, but my template has that type of setup, and I have my 2 main reverbs already in aux 1 and 2 with basic settings. They always change, but it saves me from having to load a plugin, because a lot of plugins that use iLok, if you click on them to load them, the first time it opens, it takes like a moment for it to pop open, and I'd rather just already have it. An important thing that I have is my drum matrix on there, my bussing drum matrix.
Tell us about the bussing drum matrix.
Which is
we love
not
stuff
a secret
like that.
whatsoever. Not a secret. The whole parallel processing through 1176, slamming it kind of thing. It's just the sound. People do it, period. But to route that's kind of a pain in the ass, because I'm trying to not only route it, my drum kit goes into a bus, and that bus then feeds 2 aux sends. One aux send has the 1176, so I can do parallel compression. The other one has Tim's water closet. And so I can do just as much water closet. You're like, well, why do you have it separate like that? Well, I have the drums going to that drum bus, but I have the cymbals and overheads going to a cymbal bus, which feeds the 1176 and the water closet separately, because I don't want as much cymbal and overheads in the 1176 as the close mic drums. And I also want different amounts in the water closet. And then those aux sends then cascade down into or feed into a final mix master bus, which has a 1081 plug-in with some boost and some highs and lows and some sounds, just overall shaping that
Mix
I like.
master bus just for the drums or for the whole song? Okay.
Just for the drums. So I have just a master fader bus for just the drums. Again, I try to collapse it all down to it's one instrument, and I try to use it like that.
So the drums, you've got the individual tracks, and then those tracks are also parallel feeding an 1176 mono or stereo?
Stereo.
Stereo aux bus. Is that a 1176 that's stereo linked, or is it two mono going?
It's in the box, so it's a UAD 1176.
Okay, all right, great.
It's the blackface one, 8-to-1 ratio. Fastest attack possible, releases at 3 o'clock, and I'm getting about 7 to 10 dB of compression on it usually.
Interesting. So the fastest attack, that's good to know, because we know that if we start opening that attack,
right,
you'll start hearing transients punch through, and by itself, you might go like, "Ooh, that's cool." You hear more attack of the drum,
but not as parallel.
But that's not what you want, right? Because you want this is meant to like fill in the body of the drums or something, right?
Behind the transients, yeah.
Behind the transients. Okay, cool.
Transients are straight coming through.
And then also you have the water closet, which is basically the reverb emulation
of that room, yeah.
Of that room.
Right.
And that just creates space around all the drum shells, pretty much.
And because those are on their own buses, I start with those buses are all the way down. And so I dial in my kick, my snare, my overheads, and get a basic drum sound. And then I go to my bus area and I bring up that 1176 channel and tuck it in just underneath until it's adding some body. Then I go to the water closet and I bring it up so I can just barely hear it, and then I knock it down one notch. So it's felt more than anything. And then I actually have another aux bus that are fed from the actual drum tracks. And that's just my short, bright plate reverb kind of thing that everyone does.
And then
that's what you'd actually probably hear mostly.
The whole drum mix is going through its own sort of master stereo drum bus.
Yeah, EQ.
And might you get some more parallel compression there, or no, you're done doing parallel compression at that point?
There.
What about compression on just the snare mic itself? Is that something that would all happen? That's on the snare track. Okay,
that's on this track, yeah. So everything happens.
Do you find compression useful on the kick track too?
No, I never compress the kick track by itself. It'll be in the parallel compression, and then it'll get hit by the variable mu, and it'll get hit by the tape. Okay,
all right, dig it. Okay, cool. Let's jump to bass.
Sure.
What are some useful bass treatments that show up in your mix template?
Take 200 to 220 hertz and dump it. Pull it down 6 or 8 dB. Usually, always happens.
So you're scooping. You're kind of scooping that out.
And in my early days, I was always I'm going to have the kick at like 60, and then I'm going to have the bass sit at like 90, and that way they both have room to breathe. Or on this song, I'm going to have it be. I think that's all bullshit. It doesn't seem to really work. I go off of two different levels. Do I have more mid on the bass and have the bass sit around 600 or 800 and be kind of that mid forward beefiness? Or do I have the bass, which would be like a rock type thing? So the kick, it has all of the low end, not like 60 and the bass has 90. The kick has from like a shelf, a Neve shelf at like 60, and it's boosted. So that means it's going from like 250 hertz down, and then scooped in the mid, and the bass sits way up there at like 800 or 1,000 even. That's rock to me. Or the opposite, which would be like a Sarah McLachlan song, where the bass is like 60 hertz and the kick drum really resides at like 160 or 200 is the lowest note. It's more of a mid type of a kind of a chest hitter as opposed to a thumper.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's a wider description than just trying to carve out these close knit things. I don't like that.
Yeah. Well, because you probably tried it and it sucked, and
did it for years. Yeah, and I'm like, it just never. I'm like, they still tie. It's too close. They just mud up.
What about high pass filtering? Do you find that useful on the low instruments like kick and bass?
Kick, I never use the high pass on the kick. On the bass, it depends on the bass player and the style of the bass that's happening, because there's a lot of junk that will happen that will go down past, say, 25 or 30, all the way down. And if they're using a sample for the bass or the kick, that's a whole different ballgame, because then you see sample libraries come across that'll have like a plus 10, plus 20 at 0, which is a total DC happening.
Right.
And so, of course, then I'm doing it. My overall mix, the Great River Mastering EQ, has a high pass at 27 that helps tighten up the entire mix.
Okay, cool.
That I'm using.
So 27.
Those two individual, I don't usually high pass. I'll individually high pass guitars because I want either the bass or the kick to be occupying the lows. So I might high pass them around, I don't know, 60, 90, 100 depending on, it totally depends on each one. Everything sounds different.
What are some systems you've got speakers you're mixing on, you got alternate listening speakers. Where do you discover later that the low end is causing like distortion on your mix when you're trying to turn it up? Is that a thing for you? For me, that's a struggle in the car. Like I'll go play it in the car and I'm like, man, it's just like the vocal is singing a note and there's this distortion on the vocal from the too much low end in the mix.
Right. I think I catch it. I have a sub with my Neumann K&M. My Neumanns have it's two speakers and a sub. And so I hear it good in the room. And then also walking the room, I'll know if there's too much stacking up. And then also when I hit the bows, I'll know if not necessarily the low lows are happening, but if you're getting that low boxy tone around 160, 180, because I find that that'll add as much of a distortion to other things as the stuff that's down around 20, 30, 40.
Yeah, it's one of those tricky things. I've even thought about, exploring. Well, I've thought about taking a tone generator in my car on the phone and just like sweeping it around, looking for where that tone is that seems to just sound like leaping out bass to me.
Yeah.
And I've also thought about exploring maybe in GarageBand, loading in a mix into there, and then just sweeping the EQ around and just seeing where that notch filter is, where I'm like, because sometimes
absolutely.
It's like a mental perspective. Like I'll hear it in the car and it sounds like low, but if I took it back to the studio, I might discover that the car low is actually like 110 or something in the studio or something like that.
Big time. Yes.
It gets confusing. Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about vocals for a minute.
Okay.
What are some useful vocal mixing techniques for you? I know that's a broad question since everything's different, but what are some effects that you might reach for? What are some parallel things that might come into play? What are some plugins that might be useful just on the vocal track itself?
Two different EQs, and they reside on either side of my main compressor. So I may have a setup, a kind of a go-to setup would be an EQ that I'm boosting the highs, like presence type highs. And then into usually an 1176, I just keep coming back to it for vocals. It just sounds great. The UAD one again. And then out of that into the UAD 88 RS, which is the channel strip with a very light compression on it. The 1176 is a stronger, faster compressor. The Neve one then is slower. Not only is it two different types of compression, because the 1176 is a feed forward, the Neve one is a feedback style, so it's a slower, more musical type anyway. And I'm going like 2.5 to 1 ratio. And then after that compressor is my main EQ for the vocals for dialing in everything. And then a de-esser might be at the very top of the stack, or it might be at the end of the stack. It might not be a de-esser. It might be just simply the Sequoia multiband if I need to really dig in deeper. And then my vocals leave the track and go to my main vocal bus. I'll have a lead vocal bus because vocals will come in on separate tracks. Like verse is on one track and then chorus is on a different track. So they're EQ'd a little different, levels are different. But they all fold down to a single bus of my lead vocal bus where I'll put an SSL bus compressor on it, just lightly kissing it. And I might add another de-esser at that point too if the earbuds tell me the de-essing is out of control. Yeah. If that's not grabbing it, I will take off all of the de-essers and I'll go in and I'll two different ways. I'll either use volume automation to get rid of the S's, or more likely I will use object-based editing, which Sequoia has that now Pro Tools is trying to emulate with their HD system, where you can cut a single section into its own clip or object, and that object has its own EQ, compressor, and everything on it. Sequoia's had that since like 95, and Pro Tools is finally going, oh, that's kind of a cool thing, and starting to add it. Not to rag on Pro Tools
I've been using it a little bit more on my mixes too.
I will live in an object-based editing or clip-based editing. That's everything to me. Oh my gosh, it's so important. But that I just go through and I deturt a vocal very quickly.
Yeah, because it's interesting because you'll hear like one line will hit you wrong.
Yeah.
And then you start grabbing and adjusting things, forgetting that you're adjusting the entire song of vocal when all you needed to do was just go fix the low end on that one word.
Right.
Whatever, you know?
Bingo. That's exactly it. Object-based editing or clip-based editing for Pro Tools. That's where you fix things.
Yeah.
Before it gets sent to the mixer where you do your mixing.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Well, let's jump to the sort of quick question and answer jam session questions here, and we'll blast our way out as quickly as we can. When you started out in recording, what do you feel like was holding you back?
My ego.
I knew you were going to say that.
Sorry.
You brought it up before.
It's simple. It's humbling. I've gone through a couple different seasons in my life where God's really grabbed a hold of me and kind of shooken me and said, you got to step back from this. You're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And that's one of them. It's if I hadn't had such an ego to do it myself, I would have gone and worked at other studios, and I think I would have gotten to this point in my career way faster.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. I think I'm like the most famous unknown audio engineer in the world, because it's like I write for all these things and I do all these things. I've been product specialist and people see me at AES and NAMM, but I don't have any hit records. So
well, we're changing that.
I'm working on it.
One
That's why I moved to
podcast episode
Nashville.
at a time.
I moved to Nashville hoping that I can hang out with a lot of my friends and start rubbing elbows with bigger people like I did in Los Angeles.
This is a good place to be making records for sure.
Well, I have so many friends here. That was the main thing. Angela has some family here. I have a lot of friends here, and we just love it here. I come out here all the time. Let's just move here. So,
Angela, you're incredibly, impressively quiet. You're just sitting quietly.
You can tell she owns a studio, huh?
The whole interview, yeah. That's so great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So then, all right, how about some of the best advice you received? Now, I remember you mentioned Keith Olsen giving advice on money, but I don't know if you got a chance to sort of share any takeaway from that.
I thought about this a lot, actually, as far as the best advice I've gotten, and I don't think I've gotten a lot of great advice. I've had many different mentors along the way that have, told me stuff and this and that, but didn't necessarily pan out for what I was doing. My workflow is different. One of the best pieces of advice I can give is don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Right.
Like Abraham Lincoln, I think, said that. He said, don't believe everything you read on the internet. I read on the internet, so I know he said it.
What is it, like 90% of statistics on the internet are bullshit?
Yeah, at least. But like on Gear Sluts, oh my gosh, these people that answer nonstop on Gear Sluts about how to do stuff, it's like if they were actually doing this full time, they wouldn't have time to be answering it on Gear Sluts all the time.
Right.
There's so much bad advice.
What about those people who go out and spend 2 hours talking on podcasts? They must be full of it. No,
I'm totally full of it. It's one of those things. It's like I don't have any great advice that someone's given me. It's all been kind of hard knocks learning it myself.
Yeah. I think a good takeaway from that is just remembering that it's that experience you got to go through.
It's all experience.
And I find that like trust yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe don't trust your ego, but trust your perspective on stuff, because a lot of times what you think about it is correct and you're right.
Yeah.
And you just need to like accumulate and assemble all those thoughts until you begin to have a really clear perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you get ingrained in what works for you and what you're getting the best results and the results that other people are reacting to.
Yeah.
I've always been one of those people who did not buy all the gear that everyone else has. I always looked for gear that was off the beaten path that not everyone used, because I don't want to sound like everyone else, and I want it to fit my workflow. So it's, do your own thing, because there's already a million other people doing the exact same thing.
Well, that's what I was wanting to ask, and I'm feeling like you're answering it from way back when you were talking about take the thing that's in the artist that you're producing and accentuate it and exaggerate it. But, how do you do that to your own thing?
Right.
And I guess it's just like, just be aware of what you like, what you dislike, how you do things and how it's different from other people. And
right. And
don't tuck it under a rug.
Yeah. And what's working for the client? What's making the client hot? What are you getting feedback on? And then go after that. Angela and I used to tour around doing acoustic vocal singer-songwriter stuff. We did an album together. We both sang and everything. But I was always a guitar player, like I mentioned before, not necessarily a singer. Well, we did an album together. We both sang. We went out, played all over the place. We were playing in Littleton, Colorado for a big Christmas special. We were the special guest for the big Christmas service. And I said, you sing. We're going to do 2 songs. These fit. You're just going to sing. I'll just play guitar. And as opposed to we each do one of our own songs. And so we played. And afterwards, I noticed a difference. When I sing, people would be like, dude, oh my gosh, dude, oh, you rock. When she sings, they go, can I hear that again? I was like, oh, okay. I get it. And so at that point, I quit singing. I'm like, I have my singer. People want to hear her again. You know, it's like, there's certain things that I do in a mix that people just love. And so I'll just keep doing that.
Nice.
You know?
All right. Well,
sorry, that wasn't a short answer.
No, that's all right. In the interest of time, let me jump forward.
Sure.
This one is I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question here.
Yeah.
We're going to take the studio Wayback Machine, and you're going to go back and find young Tim, just driving to or from that gig at 15, and you say, you pull yourself over. Maybe you're a cop now. You pull yourself over and you say, listen, son, I just want to tell you, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the recording studio yourself one day. Here it is. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could? Is it the ego one again?
It would be don't marry your first wife. Wait for the second ministration. It's way better.
Okay. All right. And Angela, I assume that's not you. You're not the first one.
Angela's the love of my life. In my teen years, I was distracted and did something bad.
Never did anything bad or distracted in my teen years. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's what teen years are for. I don't know what advice I'd give. I think I would definitely tell myself, don't try to do everything on your own. Don't try to do it all yourself. Become part of a team. I think that would be really important. I always, it was always my band. I was always in charge. And that carried right over to the studio. I have to have my own studio. I don't want to go work somewhere else. No, don't be alone.
Yeah.
Get a team.
Well, I'll tell you, for me, part of that has been starting this podcast and getting the help from over 200 guests like yourself.
There you go.
Fantastic advice. So thank you so much for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars.
Thank you so much for having me.
A real pleasure to have you here. And you shared a ton. I mean, I got a paper just filled with notes here. Awesome. So thank you so much. Let the Rockstars know how they can find you online. How can they follow you, connect with you if they need to make their next great record and they're not going to do it all themselves?
Exactly.
What do they do?
Yeah, if you get to the point where you're stuck on a mix or you need mastering, you just give me a holler. And you can find me everywhere. Just Tim Dolbear is it for Facebook and Instagram. And other than that, just timdolbear.com is my website. It still has pictures of the Austin studio. So if you want to go see what Austin studio looked like, it'll still be like that for another month until the new photos are done.
Well, this will be out post, so you'll be good.
Oh,
you'll
great,
be good to go. So Dolbear.
Yeah, like a bear.
Dig it. Right on, man.
And please reach out to me and ask questions and comments. I talk to people all the time. I love teaching and I love sharing.
Well, you're good at it, man. Thank you for being here, dude.
Cool.
Look forward to seeing you more around the studio. And Angela, thank you. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. Also, remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with these weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com. Look for the link in the show notes. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio, all totally free. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.